Hi, Mike Kennedy. We're continuing to talk about the Minox B. We're going to talk a little bit about exposure. Now, what we mentioned with this is rather than having an adjustable diaphragm and adjustable shutter speeds, it has a fixed aperture of 3.5. Now the shutter speeds, seen here, go up to 1,000th of a second. Well, if you do a little math, you know, or let's go to the Sunny 16 rule, you can, if you're in bright sunlight, to get the correct shutter speed at f16, you put the film speed into the exposure setting. So in other words, if you had ASA 100 film in there, and you're in bright sun with a camera with adjustable aperture, you'd put it at f16 and 1/100th of a second. Likewise, if you had something like Tri-X, which is ASA 400, you'd have f16 with some number around 1/400th. You're probably going to end up using 1/500th. That's close. So then you have a problem. If I have this camera out in sunlight and I've got it loaded with Tri-X film, the film is going to come out way overexposed, even at 1,000th. In other words, if it's supposed to be 400 at f16, you can see that if I increase the shutter speed from 400 to 1,000, I've still only gone a stop when I need to go all the way down to 3.5. So Minox solved that by, see this little slide, this little knurled area? You can move this, and if you watch here, you can see, if I push it right, there's a green filter. Oh, there it looks like it's black. Well, that's a neutral density filter. Now, normally with the Minox B, it's calibrated to take into account that filter factor. So you would still use the meter, just as you always did. You would press the little needle here, and then you would turn this shutter speed so that the pointer lined up. And this little part of the camera is the light meter, where the ASA of the film goes. Well, I have a dead meter in this, and frankly, a lot of the older cameras like this, the meters just aren't accurate anymore. So what you can do is use a manual meter, or you can guess. You'd be surprised now with color negative film is you can have an extremely wide latitude of exposures and still get some kind of image or acceptable results. But in this case, I'm going to be using a meter. Let's just say I was going to take take a picture, metering if I was going to take a picture of myself. I'd hold it, pointing it towards me. I'd press this little button on the side, and then I'd match the needles up. So in this case, we were saying ASA 400 film. So here we are, a very overcast day. This is actually telling me that I could set the camera for about a 60th of a second, and I could take a well-exposed picture of myself. So I could hold the camera like this. So of course, you know, it's pointing towards me, everything, and I could press the button. And I can also use, we talked about the focusing chain, the beads. Here we have 8 inches, 10 inches, a foot, 16 inches, and 2 feet. Well, if I did this, look at that. I could, if I go ahead just an inch, I'm at 18 inches. So I could put that into my focus, press a button, and take a picture. Now, getting back to the two filters, since the light meter basically isn't functional, so I can't use it, I can understand what filter factors are. The green filter has a filter factor of 2. That means it's going to have to be, I'm going to have to use one shutter speed lower than what the meter shows, or I can set the ASA that way. And with the neutral density filter, that's 10x. So that's quite a few stops. But I can, again, either put that in on my ASA or just use the correction afterwards. Be easier to put it in on the ASA, then you don't have to remember to fiddle with this each time. But you could do it. You could do it either way. In other words, if it said I needed, let's just say it needed an exposure of a value much higher than it is, you can just count back the number of f-stops to use. So that is how you could do manual light meter readings. And if you've got higher speed film and you're out in daylight, that little neutral density 10x filter is going to be very helpful. The green, you can read about what green filter does, but green filter obviously lightens up foliage because more of the green light comes through from other lights, other things. Some of the films back then too, they could give some more pleasing skin tones with the green filter than without it. It's not as dramatic as a red filter. A red filter, if you take pictures of a cloudy day, the clouds really stand out really well, and the sky around them goes almost black. Well, this would have a slight effect. In other words, it's going to darken the sky a little, and those clouds are still going to stand out a little bit more. So, manual exposure with a Minox B. Eventually, if you've used your meter enough, or you're into photography long enough, you can start guessing exposures. And the thing is, like I say, with color negative film, this is what made single-use cameras possible. In other words, single-use cameras typically will have a shutter speed of like, now some of them were different, so I'll just make up something that I think is close. Some of them would have an exposure 1/100th of a second f8. And so no matter where you were, that would be the thing that would happen, because you couldn't adjust the aperture or the speed. Well, what this trick was is the color negative film had reached such a peak of development that you could grossly overexpose that color negative film and still get an acceptable image way, way further than you think you could. And then even on the underexposure side, going 1 or 2 stops under, you still could get, an acceptable image. Now, people that are really into producing good photos might want to be a little more careful than that, because, on these edges, of course, you're going to get some image, but it's not going to be great. But again, when you were talking about consumer photography and things, people wanted a picture of so-and-so at the wedding. That's what they wanted, and they usually tend not to be as critical. So these cameras were great because of that factor of the film being so good at over and underexposure. So we could do the same thing with the Minox. We could use a number we guess at, and the latitude of the color negative will take care of it. And 2, now black and white films have quite a bit more latitude than they used to. Not as much as the color film does, but still, again, you can do quite a bit with them. And of course, too, now a lot of people are they produce a negative, then they scan it. So once you've done that, there are all kinds of hosts of digital enhancements you can do. So if the image is a little underexposed, it would tend to have a lack of contrast, and that could be easily adjusted in the computer process of image editing. And even in the idea of printing film, you would print things on higher contrast, and there would be different ways to address that issue. But there we go. Some ways to use the neutral density filter and the green filter, what they're for, and why they're there. I'm going to show you a couple close-ups of this camera with the lenses, the filters in place. And also they mention here, I'm going off of now, which I'm really glad I purchased this. Small Minox, big pictures. This is published in 1978, and someone told me, oh no, this is 1968. Okay, 68. Someone told me that this was actually wasn't the original. There was another one, and this was re-edited. But anyway, this has a lot of information about the B. So it's really good. I'm getting a lot of information out of it, and I'll continue on. We'll be adding more techniques and more facts about the actual camera itself as we go along. Bye.